Director Vaughn Kellis had what could only be described as a profoundly punchable face. Not because of any particular feature, mind you, but because of the expression permanently plastered across it. That specific combination of smugness and self-satisfaction that made you want to introduce his nose to your fist at high velocity. Today, that expression had reached critical mass. Gentle beings, Vaughn announced to the assembled press corps crowding the observation deck of Station Kepler 9. I present to you the future of galactic warfare, the Apex 7 combat synthetic. On cue, the demonstration floor below illuminated, revealing a humanoid figure that looked like someone had asked an algorithm to design the perfect soldier and then added way too much chrome. The Apex 7 stood motionless, a 7-foot monument to technological superiority and Vaughn's ego. Faster than any biological entity, stronger, more efficient, and unlike certain outdated organic models, Vaughn paused for effect, his mandibles clicking in what his species considered a smile, entirely free from the limitations of fear, doubt, or that peculiar human tendency to do profoundly stupid things and call it courage. Scattered laughter rippled through the press corps. The Galactic Weapons Consortium had been building toward this announcement for months, and everyone knew what, or rather who, Vaughn was talking about. Humans. For the past century, humans had somehow stumbled their way into becoming the galaxy's go-to military contractors. Not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they possessed an apparently unique talent for creative violence and refusing to accept when they were beaten. It irritated the more established species to no end. Tessa Rourke, head of security for the Kepler 9 facility, watched the presentation from the back of the room with her arms crossed and her jaw clenched. As the only human on Vaughn's staff, she'd been listening to variations of this speech for 6 months. Her opinion had been consistently and colorfully ignored. The biological soldier is obsolete, Vaughn continued, warming to his theme. Particularly the human variant. Oh, they have their charm, certainly, like primitive projectile weapons or chemical propulsion. Quaint, historical, but ultimately unnecessary when superior alternatives exist. Pip, Vaughn's assistant researcher, a nervous Quellan who looked like a bipedal ferret had anxiety issues, fidgeted with his datapad near the doorway. Director, perhaps we should moderate the phrasing. The human mercenary guilds have considerable influence and— Let them complain. Vaughn waved a dismissive appendage. What are they going to do? Prove me wrong? The data is irrefutable. The Apex 7 exceeds human performance metrics in every measurable category. Reaction time, strength, endurance, tactical processing, everything. Tessa cleared her throat. Everything except actual combat experience. Vaughn's expression soured. We've run 10,000 simulations. Simulations aren't the same as someone actively trying to kill you, Director. Trust me on this one. Your sentimentality is noted and dismissed, Ms. Rourke. The age of human military relevance has ended. The consortium recognizes this truth, even if you cannot. The press conference concluded with appropriate fanfare. Vaughn's declaration went viral across the galactic net within minutes. Humanity, the galaxy's scrappy underdog, had officially been declared obsolete. The memes started immediately. Tessa spent the rest of the day fielding increasingly hostile messages from former colleagues in the Human Defense Forces. She didn't blame them. Vaughn had basically stood on a galactic stage and called the entirety of human military history irrelevant. By evening, the lab was celebrating. Vaughn had broken out his private stock of Andromedan spirits. Pip was nervously making toasts about progress and innovation, and the research staff was already calculating their bonus projections. That's when someone knocked on the door. Not the main hangar doors, not the security checkpoint. The actual laboratory entrance, which was locked behind 7 different security protocols and supposedly inaccessible to anyone without maximum clearance. Everyone froze. Are we expecting anyone? Vaughn asked. Pip checked his datapad, his whiskers twitching. No, Director. The facility is on restricted access. No one should be able to reach that door without triggering alarms. Tessa was already moving toward the security console. Then how did someone knock on it? The knock came again. Patient, polite, utterly unconcerned with the impossibility of its existence. Tessa pulled up the external camera feed and felt something cold settle in her stomach. Standing outside their maximum security weapons laboratory, looking for all the world like he'd just wandered over to borrow a cup of sugar, was a human man in civilian clothes, jeans, a jacket, boots that had seen better days. He was maybe 40, with the kind of relaxed posture that came from either complete ignorance of danger or such thorough familiarity with it that it had become boring. He smiled at the camera and waved. "Oh no," Tessa said quietly. "Oh no what?" Vaughan demanded. "It's just a human. Probably some tourist who got lost." Director: "Tourists don't bypass military-grade security systems." "Then he's a spy. Call station security." The human outside pulled out what looked like a coffee thermos, took a sip, and knocked again. Tessa made a decision. "I'm opening the door." "Absolutely not. Director, with respect, that man got through every security measure we have without triggering a single alarm. If he wanted to do something hostile, we'd already be in trouble. I'd rather talk to him than wait to find out what he does when he gets impatient." Vaughan sputtered, but Tessa was already keying the unlock sequence. The door hissed open. The human stepped inside, glanced around the laboratory with mild interest, and smiled like they'd just been invited to a pleasant garden party. "Hey there," he said. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Name's Marcus Webb. I saw your presentation earlier today. Really fascinating stuff. Would love to see a demonstration of those new synthetics if you've got time." His tone was friendly. His eyes were not. Tessa recognized that look. She'd seen it in mirrors during her service years. This was a man who'd done violence, knew he was good at it, and wasn't particularly bothered by the prospect of doing more. "How did you get in here?" she asked. Marcus took another sip from his thermos. "Walked. Your sensor grid has a blind spot near the waste recycling port. Your door locks use a 17-year-old encryption standard, and your guard patrol has a 4-minute gap in coverage during shift change. Also, Jenkins at Checkpoint 3 really needs to stop leaving his access card in his lunch bag." Silence. "I left him a note," Marcus added helpfully. "Figured he'd want to know." Vaughan had recovered from his shock and was cycling back to indignation. "This is a restricted military facility. You're trespassing." "Technically, sure, but I did knock. Seems polite." Marcus's smile widened. "So how about that demonstration?" Vaughan's mandibles clicked rapidly, which Tessa had learned meant he was cycling through emotional states faster than his translator could process. Confusion, anger, more confusion. A touch of fear he'd never admit to. Then, inevitably, back to arrogance. "You want a demonstration," Vaughan said slowly, "of technology that just rendered your entire species militarily irrelevant?" "That's the one." Marcus wandered over to the observation window overlooking the testing arena, apparently unconcerned that he was surrounded by increasingly nervous security personnel. "See, the thing is, I've got some buddies back on Earth. Good guys. Used to be Marines. Did the whole military thing, saw the galaxy, shot at folks who shot at them first. Now they're retired, working boring jobs. Security guards, mechanics. One guy runs a fishing charter." He turned back to face Vaughan, still smiling. "They saw your announcement, got their feelings hurt, asked me to look into it since I was in the sector anyway." "Look into it," Tessa repeated carefully. "What exactly does that mean?" "Well, you know, see if the claims match reality. Scientific method and all that." Marcus pulled out a datapad that looked distinctly military-grade despite its civilian casing. "I pulled your published specs on the Apex 7. Really impressive numbers. Reaction time clocked at 0.003 seconds. Lifting capacity around 800 kilos. Thermal imaging, ballistic trajectory calculation, tactical probability modeling. Heck of a resume." Pip had edged closer, his natural curiosity apparently overriding his anxiety. "You understand the technical specifications?" "Used to evaluate military hardware for procurement. You pick things up." Marcus scrolled through his datapad. "What I'm curious about is the practical application. Because specs are great, but they don't tell you how something performs when the variables get weird." Vaughan's posture had shifted. Tessa recognized the change. He'd gone from alarmed to intrigued. in the way scientists always did when someone challenged their work. It was the academic equivalent of waving a red flag at a bull. "You think you can outperform an Apex 7 unit?" Vaughn said. It wasn't a question. "I think your synthetics have never fought anyone who fights back in ways they are not programmed to expect. That's not a criticism, just an observation." "And you have?" "Director," Tessa interjected. "Maybe we should check with the consortium before—" "No!" Vaughn was fully committed now, his earlier caution evaporated by the prospect of proving his point to an actual human. The irony wasn't lost on Tessa. "No, this is perfect. A practical demonstration for our skeptical guest. We'll run the standard evaluation protocols. If our Apex 7 units exceed your performance, you leave, admit defeat, and file a report with your Marine friends that they've been, as you humans say, outclassed." "And if I match or beat your synthetics?" Marcus asked. "Then you'll have my personal apology and admission that perhaps I overstated my conclusions. Does that seem fair?" Marcus appeared to consider this. "Add in a full facility tour and detailed tech specs, and you've got a deal." "Absolutely not. The specifications are proprietary." "Then I guess we don't have a demonstration." Marcus headed toward the door. "Shame. Would have been fun." "Wait." Vaughn's mandibles clicked again. Tessa could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Pride versus protocol. Limited specifications, non-classified technical details only. "Works for me." Marcus extended his hand. Vaughn stared at it for a moment before remembering the human custom and extending his own appendage. They shook. Tessa wanted to scream. Instead, she pulled out her personal comm and started running a background check on Marcus Webb, while Vaughn enthusiastically explained the demonstration protocols. The results came back faster than she expected, probably because Marcus's file had about 17 different security flags attached to it. Marcus Webb, age 42. Former Human Special Operations Division, service record partially classified. Known deployments to the contested zones during the border wars, specialized training in asymmetric warfare, hostage rescue, and something labeled unconventional problem solving, which was military speak for creative violence. Current status, retired. Occupation listed as independent consultant, which could mean anything from legitimate security advisor to deniable asset for governments who needed things done quietly. The file had a note from Human Intelligence Command. Subject demonstrates high competence, questionable judgment, and a concerning tendency to accept challenges he should decline. Approach with caution. Do not antagonize. Tessa looked up from her comm to find Marcus watching her with an expression of mild amusement. He knew she was checking his background. He didn't care. "Find anything interesting?" he asked. "Nothing that makes me feel better about this situation." "Yeah, that's usually how people react to my resume." He turned back to Vaughn, who was still explaining protocols. "Quick question, Director. When you say standard evaluation protocols, are we talking simulations or live exercises?" "We'll start with simulations. Reaction testing, accuracy assessment, tactical problem solving. If you perform adequately, we can discuss live combat scenarios." "Adequately," Marcus repeated, tasting the word. "Sure, let's start there." Pip had been quietly setting up the testing arena, his nervous energy channeled into useful activity. The demonstration space was impressive, Tessa had to admit. Multiple environments could be generated through hard-light holography. Environmental controls allowed for variable gravity and atmosphere, and the targeting systems could track movements down to the millimeter. It was designed to test the absolute limits of combat performance. Vaughn had spared no expense. "One more thing," Marcus said. "I'm going to need to borrow some equipment. Didn't bring my gear, what with this being a casual visit and all." Vaughn gestured magnanimously. "Of course. Pip, get our guest whatever he needs from the standard loadout inventory." "Appreciate it." Marcus followed Pip toward the equipment lockers, chatting amiably about the station's atmosphere recycling system and whether the cafeteria was any good. Tessa moved closer to Vaughn. "Director, I really think we should reconsider this." "Why?" "Concerned your fellow human will embarrass himself. Concerned about what happens when he doesn't." Vaughn's laugh was sharp. "Ms. Rourke, I appreciate your loyalty to your species, but the mathematics are clear. The Apex 7 represents the pinnacle of combat design. One retired human soldier, no matter how decorated, cannot compete with perfection. He got into our facility without triggering alarms. Security oversights will address them. He identified them in under an hour. Lucky guesses. Tessa gave up. There was no arguing with certainty, especially when that certainty was wrapped around someone's professional reputation. Marcus returned wearing a borrowed tactical vest and carrying a standard-issue pulse rifle that looked almost comically mundane in his hands. He checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, his movements economical and precise. "All set," he announced. "Let's see what these Apex 7s can do." Vorn practically vibrated with anticipation. "Oh, you'll be impressed. Pip, initialize the first unit. Let's begin with reaction time assessment." The testing arena hummed to life. An Apex 7 synthetic stepped onto the marked floor, its movements fluid and perfect. It looked at Marcus with glowing optical sensors that betrayed no emotion, no hesitation, no humanity. Marcus looked back and smiled like he'd just been introduced to a new friend. "Hey there, buddy," he said to the synthetic. "This is going to be fun." Tessa wasn't sure which of them he was talking to. She suspected it didn't matter. The first Apex 7 unit stood in the testing arena like a statue carved from chrome and bad decisions. Vorn gestured toward it with the pride of a parent at a school recital, except this particular child was designed to efficiently kill things. "The Apex 7, Vorn announced, represents 15 years of research and development. Every aspect has been optimized, every variable calculated, every weakness eliminated." "Every weakness?" Marcus asked, circling the synthetic with casual interest. "That's a bold claim." "Observe." Vorn nodded to Pip, who initiated the first test sequence. The arena transformed, hard light holography, generating a tactical environment. Multiple targets appeared at random intervals and positions. The test was simple. Identify threats, engage, neutralize. Speed and accuracy both counted. The Apex 7 moved. Tessa had seen the units in action before, but it still impressed her. The synthetic identified, targeted, and fired at 17 separate threats in the span of 4.3 seconds. Every shot was perfect. Center mass, no wasted movement, no hesitation. It was like watching a particularly efficient algorithm solve a math problem, except the math problem involved simulated death. 17 targets, 4.3 seconds, 100% accuracy, Pip reported, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and nervousness. "Current testing record." Vorn looked at Marcus expectantly. "Your turn." Marcus stepped into the arena, checked his borrowed rifle one more time, and rolled his shoulders like he was loosening up for a game of recreational sports rather than a demonstration of combat capability. "Ready when you are," he said. The test initiated. Targets appeared. Marcus engaged. Where the Apex 7 had been efficient, Marcus was something else entirely. Not faster, necessarily, but different. He moved like someone who'd done this so many times that thinking about it would only slow him down. His weapon tracked targets with practiced ease. His positioning adjusted for angles the synthetic hadn't considered, and somewhere around target 12, he started narrating. "Hostile left, gone. Hostile right, really gone. Friendly, not shooting that one, obviously. Hostile above, somebody needs to fire their architect. Hostile behind, didn't see that coming, did you? Oh hey, is that a bonus target?" He finished in 4.6 seconds. 16 out of 17 targets neutralized. "You missed one," Vorn pointed out, mandibles clicking smugly. "That one was a friendly," Marcus replied, gesturing to target 14. "Had a green indicator on the left side. Figured shooting friendlies was poor form." Pippa checked the test parameters and made a small noise of surprise. "He's correct, Director. Target 14 was marked as non-hostile. The Apex 7 eliminated it as a standard engagement." Vorn's smugness evaporated slightly. "The test doesn't normally include non-hostile targets." "Probably should," Marcus said cheerfully. "Wouldn't want your perfect soldiers shooting the wrong people. That generates a lot of paperwork." Tessa found herself fighting a smile. Marcus had been half a second slower than the synthetic, but had actually performed better by not shooting everything that moved. It was the kind of nuance that pure optimization tended to miss. An interesting observation, Vorn said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. However, reaction time and target discrimination are only one aspect of combat capability. Shall we proceed to tactical problem-solving? Sure. Love a good puzzle. The arena reconfigured into an urban environment. Hostile targets hidden behind cover, civilians scattered throughout, multiple entry points and sightlines. The objective was clear. Neutralize all hostiles, minimize civilian casualties, complete the scenario in minimum time. Standard tactical problem. Tessa had trained in dozens like it during her military service. The Apex 7 approached it methodically. Advanced through optimal cover positions, used tactical probability to predict hostile locations, employed suppressing fire to control enemy movement. It was textbook perfect, the kind of tactical execution that would earn high marks at any military academy in the galaxy. Time to completion, 11 minutes, 23 seconds. 0 civilian casualties. All hostiles neutralized. Perfect score. Vorn looked insufferably pleased with himself. Marcus studied the arena layout for a moment, then asked, "Are there rules about property damage?" "What?" "Property damage. Am I allowed to break things, or is this a preserve the infrastructure kind of scenario?" Pip checked the parameters. The test doesn't specify restrictions on environmental damage. Great! Marcus cracked his knuckles. That simplifies everything. He entered the arena and immediately did something that made Vorn sputter in indignation. Instead of advancing through the careful cover positions, Marcus shot out a structural support on a building facade. The entire wall collapsed, crushing 3 hostile targets and opening up sightlines to 4 more. "What are you doing?" Vorn demanded. "That's not proper tactical procedure." "Working smarter, not harder," Marcus called back, already moving to his next position. He proceeded to solve the tactical problem through what could only be described as creative chaos. Collapsed another building. Used civilian NPCs as moving cover, which was ethically questionable, but technically not against the rules. Set off what appeared to be a fire suppression system, creating a smokescreen that only he knew how to navigate because he'd created it. The Apex 7's approach had been elegant. Marcus's was like watching someone solve a Rubik's Cube with a hammer. Effective, certainly, but wildly unpredictable. Time to completion, 7 minutes, 14 seconds. 2 civilian casualties, both from the first building collapse, all hostiles neutralized. "That was terrible," Vorn said flatly. "That was faster," Marcus countered, stepping out of the arena and dusting off his vest. "And in actual combat, faster means fewer of my people die. I'll take messy and alive over elegant and dead any day." "You killed civilians!" 2 simulated civilians versus the 4 human soldiers who would have died in the extra 4 minutes your synthetic took. I can live with that math. Not happily, but I can live with it. Tessa felt the uncomfortable truth of that statement. Marcus wasn't wrong. In real combat, speed mattered. Hesitation killed. The Apex 7 had executed perfectly, but perfection took time. The test parameters didn't account for someone willing to break everything in sight to win, Marcus finished. That's a human specialty, Director. We're really good at finding the option you didn't plan for and exploiting it until your carefully designed system falls apart. Vaughn's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they were almost humming. Fine. You've proven you can cheat at simulations. That doesn't demonstrate genuine combat superiority. Wasn't cheating. I followed all stated rules. The spirit of the rules is a luxury you get when people aren't actively trying to kill you. Marcus's tone remained friendly, but there was steel underneath. Look, Director, your synthetics are impressive, genuinely. They do exactly what they're designed to do, and they do it perfectly. That's valuable. But perfect execution of the expected doesn't prepare you for the unexpected. And combat is 90% unexpected, with a side of things going wrong in ways you didn't know were possible. Then let's test the unexpected, Vaughn snapped. Pip, prep 3 Apex 7 units for live combat demonstration. Full contact, safety protocols engaged. Pip's whiskers twitched nervously. Director, are you certain, absolutely certain, Our guest wants to see how the Apex 7s handle unpredictability. Let's give him an unforgettable demonstration. Tessa stepped forward. Director, I need to speak with you. Privately, now. Vaughn waved her off. Not now, Ms. Rourke. We're about to prove the superiority of... Now, Director. Her tone left no room for argument. They stepped into a side office. Tessa closed the door and activated the privacy screen. What's so important? Marcus Webb is former Human Special Operations. His file has more classified sections than readable ones. His specialization is listed as unconventional problem-solving, which in military terminology means he's trained to win fights he should lose through methods that probably violate several conventions. So he's had training. Our Apex 7 units have literally thousands of combat scenarios programmed. Training isn't the same as experience, and this man has experience. Tessa pulled up his file on her datapad. He's been in actual combat, against opponents who were trying to kill him, who adapted and fought back. Your synthetics have only ever faced simulations and controlled tests. That's why they'll win, Vaughn insisted. No fear, no hesitation, pure tactical execution. Director, with respect, you're letting your ego make tactical decisions. This is a bad idea. Your concern is noted. Vaughn headed for the door. But I'm going to enjoy watching our Apex 7 units prove, definitively and undeniably, that human soldiers are obsolete. Tessa wanted to argue further, but recognized futility when she saw it. Instead, she pulled out her personal comm and started composing a message to station security. When this went wrong, and she was increasingly certain it would, she wanted backup available. They returned to the observation deck to find Marcus stretching, apparently unconcerned that he'd just agreed to fight 3 combat synthetics simultaneously. All set, he asked cheerfully. 3 Apex 7 units, full combat capability, safety protocols engaged to prevent lethal damage, Vaughn announced. If you want to withdraw... Nah, I'm good. Should be fun. Marcus checked his borrowed equipment one more time. Quick question, though. When you say safety protocols, does that mean they'll stop before actually killing me, or just pull their punches? They'll register lethal strikes without executing them. Simulated lethality. Got it. So if I end up with 27 fatal wounds in the first 10 seconds, we all acknowledge I lost. Precisely. Cool. Marcus headed toward the arena entrance, then paused. Oh, one more thing. Do the synthetics have safety protocols preventing them from experiencing simulated death, or can I actually win this? Pip consulted his datapad. They register damage and system failures. Sufficient damage will result in unit shutdown, simulating combat incapacitation. Perfect. Marcus's smile widened. Just wanted to make sure this was a fair fight. You're concerned about fairness, Vaughn said skeptically, when facing 3 opponents. Not for me, Director, for them. And with that deeply concerning statement, Marcus stepped into the arena. The combat arena had reconfigured into a multi-level environment that looked like someone had taken an industrial complex, a forest, and an urban landscape, thrown them in a blender, and poured the results into a tactical nightmare. Cover everywhere. Sight lines broken by terrain, elevation changes that provided advantages and created blind spots simultaneously. It was designed to test adaptive capability under complex conditions. Vaughn had clearly pulled out all the stops. 3 Apex 7 units entered from different positions, forming a tactical triangle that would allow them to coordinate fire and eliminate escape routes. Their movements were synchronized, their positioning optimal, their threat assessment algorithms already calculating probability matrices. Marcus stood in the center of the arena, looking at each synthetic in turn, and cracked his knuckles. All right, he said to no one in particular. Let's see what you've got. The combat initiated. The Apex 7 units moved with mechanical precision, advancing through cover, establishing crossfire positions, preparing to execute a coordinated assault that would eliminate their target through overwhelming tactical superiority. Marcus threw a rock at the nearest one, not a tactical grenade, not a piece of equipment. An actual rock he'd apparently picked up from the terrain. It bounced off the synthetic's chest plate with a hollow thunk. The Apex 7 paused for approximately 0.3 seconds, recalculating this unexpected variable. Rocks were not standard combat implements. The probability matrices struggled to incorporate this data. In that 0.3 seconds, Marcus had moved, rolling behind cover and repositioning to a location the synthetics' tactical algorithms had predicted because it was technically inferior from a defensive standpoint. "Oh, you're wondering why I took the bad position," Marcus called out cheerfully. "Yeah, that's kind of the point. See, you're thinking optimal tactics. I'm thinking about what you're thinking, which means I'm doing the thing you've calculated I won't do because it's stupid." He popped up and fired 3 quick shots at Apex 7 Unit 2, targeting what Tessa recognized as sensor clusters rather than center mass. The synthetic's visual processing degraded by approximately 30%. "And now you're partially blind," Marcus continued, sounding like he was narrating a nature documentary. "Which means your threat assessment gets harder, which means you have to rely more on your tactical algorithms, which means you're more predictable. It's a whole thing." Vaughn watched from the observation deck, his mandibles clicking in what might have been concern or annoyance or possibly both. "He's providing tactical analysis while fighting. Why is he doing that?" "Psychological warfare," Tessa said quietly. "Talking keeps him calm, but it also disturbs opponents who aren't used to casual conversation during combat. The synthetics won't care, but it's interesting that he's doing it anyway. Means it's habit." The Apex 7 units adapted, adjusting their formation to account for the degraded sensors on Unit 2. They advanced again, coordinating their approach to minimize exposure. Marcus responded by doing something that made absolutely no tactical sense. He charged directly at Unit 3, not a tactical advance, not a calculated assault. A straight-up run toward an opponent with superior strength, speed, and reflexes, while screaming what sounded like a song about flowers. Tessa thought it might be a children's nursery rhyme. The Apex 7's threat assessment algorithms had no idea what to do with this. The probability of a direct frontal assault by an inferior opponent was calculated at less than 2%. The probability of doing so while singing was essentially 0. The synthetic hesitated, only for a fraction of a second, but it hesitated. Marcus slid under its defensive position, grabbed one of its legs, and used the synthetic's own superior strength against it, leveraging momentum and mechanical advantage to flip the unit over. It crashed into cover, temporarily disoriented. "And that's why you don't skip physics class," Marcus said, already moving again. The combat devolved into what could only be described as organized chaos. The Apex 7 units executed perfect tactics. Marcus ignored perfect tactics entirely, opting instead for whatever worked in the immediate moment, even if it contradicted what he'd done 3 seconds earlier. He used the environment in ways the synthetics hadn't been programmed to consider, collapsed a platform to create a ramp, set off the fire suppression system again, apparently just because he liked the aesthetic. At one point, he threw his rifle at Unit 1, hitting it square in the optical sensor, then stole Unit 2's weapon while it was recalibrating. "This is ridiculous," Vaughn muttered. "He's not following any tactical doctrine." "That's because he's not trying to," Tessa replied. "He's creating chaos and surviving in it. The Apex 7 units are trying to impose order. They're not compatible approaches." Marcus had somehow gotten himself into a position where 2 of the synthetics were on opposite sides of him, creating a crossfire scenario that should have been immediately lethal. Instead, he dropped flat at the exact moment both units fired, and they shot each other. Safety protocols registered the hits. Both units showed significant system damage. "Did he just make them shoot each other?" Pip asked, his voice a mixture of horror and fascination. "He baited them into it," Tessa confirmed. "Created a situation where their optimal firing solution involved shooting through where he was standing, then didn't stand there. That requires predicting their tactical response with extraordinary precision, or having done similar things enough times that you know how to make it work." Unit 3, the one Marcus had flipped earlier, had recovered and was attempting a flanking maneuver. Marcus seemed to notice it through what might have been peripheral vision or possibly a sixth sense developed from years of people trying to kill him. He spun, fired 3 shots at the unit's knee joint, and when it stumbled, vaulted over it in a move that was probably very impressive if you weren't actively concerned about the person's mental health. "Is he having fun?" Vaughn asked, sounding disturbed. I think he might be, Tessa admitted. The fight continued for another 4 minutes, which in combat time felt like approximately 17 hours. Marcus dismantled the Apex 7 units through a combination of tactical improvisation, environmental exploitation, and sheer stubborn refusal to fight the way they expected him to. When the last synthetic powered down, registering too much simulated damage to continue, Marcus stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard but grinning like he'd just won a lottery rather than survived a fight against overwhelming odds. That was a good workout, he called up to the observation deck. Your synthetics are really solid, gave me some trouble there in the middle. Vaughn stood in absolute silence, staring at the arena. His earlier smugness had evaporated, replaced by an expression Tessa couldn't quite read. Shock, probably. Maybe some anger. Definitely a lot of confusion about how his perfect warriors had been systematically disassembled by one human who seemed to be operating on pure spite and improvisation. How? Vaughn finally managed. How did you do that? Practice, Marcus replied, climbing out of the arena. And a deep-seated unwillingness to die in stupid ways. Your Apex 7s are impressive, Director. Genuinely. They execute tactics perfectly. But perfect execution of expected tactics is just the baseline. Combat isn't about doing what you're supposed to do. It's about doing what works when everything you're supposed to do stops working. He retrieved his borrowed equipment, checked it over, and handed it back to a stunned Pip. Plus, and I mean this with all due respect, your synthetics have never been in a fight where they might actually die. Fear is a hell of a teacher. They'll never have that education. Pip had been furiously typing notes throughout the entire demonstration. Now he looked up, his whiskers twitching with barely contained scientific curiosity. Mr. Webb, during the engagement, you made 17 tactical decisions that our probability models rated as suboptimal or actively detrimental to your survival. Yet you survived. How is that possible? Because your probability models assume everyone's trying to make optimal decisions, Marcus explained. Sometimes the right move is the stupid move because nobody expects it, including me, occasionally. Tessa had been running her own analysis during the fight, and something had been bothering her. You targeted sensor clusters on your second engagement. That's not standard doctrine for synthetics. How did you know where they were vulnerable? Marcus's expression shifted slightly, the friendly mask slipping just enough to show something calculating underneath. Read the technical specifications before I came. Your published data was very thorough. Maybe too thorough. That information was cleared for public release, Vaughn said defensively. Sure was. Told me exactly where to hit to degrade capability without triggering shutdown protocols. Also told me your synthetics rely heavily on visual and thermal sensors, which meant smoke and debris would create targeting problems. Also told me their tactical algorithms prioritize threat elimination over self-preservation, which means they'll take shots even if it puts them at risk. Vaughn's mandibles had stopped clicking. He was staring at Marcus with an expression that might have been respect if it wasn't so thoroughly mixed with horror. You read our specifications and reverse-engineered our tactical vulnerabilities. That's a fancy way of saying I did my homework, but sure. Marcus pulled out his datapad again. Want to know the really interesting part? Your Apex 7 units have 63 documented weaknesses in your published specifications. 63. Most of them are minor, but 12 are significant enough that any competent military analyst would exploit them immediately. That's impossible. Those specifications were reviewed by engineers who've never been shot at, Marcus interrupted gently. No offense to your team, Director, but there's a difference between theoretical vulnerability assessment and practical combat experience. You know what your synthetics should be able to handle. I know what actually happens when you're trying to kill someone who's trying to kill you back. Tessa found herself nodding. It was the eternal problem with weapons development. The people designing the systems rarely had experience using them in actual life-or-death situations. You ended up with equipment that worked perfectly in controlled conditions and fell apart when reality got messy. Vaughn had recovered enough of his composure to attempt a counter-argument. Your victory today was impressive. I'll grant you that. But it was against 3 units. In actual combat, our Apex 7 synthetics would deploy in squadron strength. 20, 30, even 50 units operating in coordination. Could you defeat those numbers? Nope, Marcus said cheerfully. I'd die horribly, probably in the first 30 seconds. The admission seemed to catch Vaughan off guard. Then you acknowledge numerical superiority would… Oh, absolutely. Send enough of anything at a target, and you'll win eventually. That's not the question you should be asking, though. What question should I be asking? How many of your very expensive Apex 7 units would I take with me? Because based on today's demonstration, I'm thinking 8 to 12 before I went down. And that's just me. Imagine if you were facing a squad of humans with similar training, or a platoon, or, and this is the thought that should really keep you up at night, an entire human military that spent the last century learning how to fight things that are bigger, stronger, and faster than they are. Silence fell over the observation deck. Tessa watched the implications register on Vaughan's face. The Apex 7 units weren't bad. They were actually quite good, but they were expensive, and humans were numerous, and humans had this unfortunate habit of adapting to whatever you threw at them. The math suddenly didn't look as favorable as it had that morning. And furthermore, Marcus continued, apparently not done making his point, your synthetics are consistent. That's a feature when you want reliable performance. It's a weakness when your opponent can predict your behavior. Every Apex 7 unit in the galaxy will respond basically the same way to the same situation because they are running the same core programming. Kill one, you've learned how to kill all of them. Humans, though, we're inconsistent, unpredictable. Every soldier fights a little differently, has different training, different experience, different ideas about what's acceptable risk. That diversity makes us harder to counter. Pip was still taking notes, his scientific interest apparently overriding the fact that his entire research project had just been thoroughly challenged. Your argument suggests that imperfection is tactically superior to optimization. In combat, absolutely. Optimized systems are brittle. They work great until something breaks, then they fail catastrophically. Messy, inconsistent systems are resilient. They adapt. They survive conditions they were never designed for. Marcus gestured at the arena. Your Apex 7s are optimized for known threat scenarios. Humans are optimized for surviving whatever nightmare the universe decides to throw at us next. This is all very philosophical, Vaughan said. But it doesn't change the fundamental reality. Human soldiers are biological. They require food, water, sleep, medical care. They have emotional weaknesses. They hesitate, they break, they make mistakes. Our synthetics have none of these limitations. True, Marcus agreed. Your synthetics don't need food or sleep. They also don't get creative when they're hungry. Don't develop new tactics because they're bored. Don't improvise solutions because they're angry someone shot their friend. Humans run on spite, Director. Never underestimate what we can accomplish when we're properly motivated by sheer stubborn fury. Tessa found herself smiling despite the situation. She'd served with humans like Marcus. Hell, she'd been a human like Marcus. The galaxy was full of species that were objectively superior to humans in various categories. Stronger, faster, smarter, better senses, longer lifespans. But humans had carved out a niche anyway through sheer determination and creative violence. So, what happens now? Vaughan asked, sounding tired. You've proven your point. Human soldiers aren't obsolete. Congratulations. Was that the goal here? Part of it, Marcus admitted. The other part was making sure you understood that declaring humans obsolete was, and I'm being polite here, premature and kind of insulting. The consortium can do whatever it wants. I'm not here officially. This was a personal visit, motivated by some retired Marines who got their feelings hurt. Marcus headed toward the door, then paused. But if you're smart, and I think you are despite today's evidence to the contrary, you'll reconsider your public position on human military utility. Because the thing about humans is, we hold grudges, make us look bad, we remember, and then we show up and do annoying things like breaking into your secure facility and embarrassing your research project. Is that a threat? That's a friendly warning. There's a difference. Marcus pulled out a small card from his jacket and handed it to Vaughan. My consulting rates if you ever want a second opinion on your synthetic designs. I'm expensive, but cheaper than developing 3 generations of units before someone points out the obvious problems. Vaughan took the card mechanically, staring at it like it might explode. Also, Marcus added, You should probably fire whoever designed your perimeter security, or at least make them review their encryption standards. That 17-year-old protocol is older than some of your staff." And with that parting observation, Marcus headed for the exit. Tessa followed him. She had questions, and more importantly, she needed to make sure he actually left without causing more problems. They walked in silence through the facility corridors until they were well away from the laboratory. Finally, Tessa spoke. "That was reckless." "Yep." "You could have been seriously hurt." "Also, yep." "You enjoyed it." Marcus's grin returned. "What gave it away?" "The part where you sang a children's song while charging a combat synthetic. To be fair, that was tactical. Unexpected behavior creates hesitation. Hesitation creates opportunity. It was Mary Had a Little Lamb. I like the classics." Marcus stopped at a junction. "Look, I know you're concerned. You're thinking I'm going to cause problems for the facility, maybe get people hurt, definitely complicate your professional life. I get it. Are you going to cause problems?" "Not planning to. Made my point. Vaughn's going to think real hard about his public statements. The consortium is going to reevaluate their marketing strategy, and some Marines back on Earth are going to have a good laugh about the whole thing. That's enough. What if Vaughn reports this to station security? Then I'll deal with it. But I don't think he will. You know why?" Tessa considered. "Because it would mean admitting his secure facility was breached and his supposedly superior synthetics were defeated in combat demonstration." "Exactly. Bad for his reputation, bad for future funding. Better to pretend I was never here and quietly address the vulnerabilities I identified." Marcus checked his datapad. "My shuttle leaves in 2 hours. Should be plenty of time to get through security without causing more incidents." "How did you really get in here?" Marcus's expression went carefully neutral. "Told you. Walked through the gaps in your security." "That's not the whole truth." "No," he admitted, "but it's the truth I'm giving you. Sometimes it's better not to know all the details." They reached the main corridor that led to the station's civilian section. Marcus extended his hand again. Tessa shook it. "Thanks for not shooting me," he said. "Thanks for not making me." "Fair." Marcus headed down the corridor, whistling the same children's song he'd sung during the fight. Tessa watched him go, then pulled out her comm and sent a message to her former commander in Human Defense Forces. Just a simple note. "The rumors are true. We're still in the game." The response came back almost immediately. "Never doubted it." Tessa returned to the observation deck to find Vaughn sitting alone, staring at the empty combat arena with an expression that suggested he was reevaluating several major life decisions simultaneously. Pip had disappeared, probably to process the data from the demonstration. The other researchers had scattered, likely to avoid being near their director during this particular emotional crisis. "He embarrassed us," Vaughn said without looking up. "He proved a point," Tessa corrected, taking a seat nearby. "There's a difference. A difference that will cost me considerable credibility with the consortium." Vaughn's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought in his species. "I declared humans obsolete, publicly, with full confidence, and then a single human walked into my facility and systematically defeated my supposedly superior combat synthetics. To be fair, he's not a typical human. That makes it worse, not better. If exceptional humans can still outperform my designs, then the average ones remain competitive, and the truly exceptional ones remain superior. My entire thesis was flawed." Tessa felt an unexpected sympathy for the director. She disagreed with his conclusions, argued against his approach, and quietly resented his dismissal of human capability. But she understood the feeling of being wrong in a very public, very expensive way. "The Apex 7s aren't failures," she said carefully. "They're impressive technology. They just might not be the complete replacement for biological soldiers you claimed." "Might not be," Vaughn repeated with a bitter laugh. "Ms. Rourke, your fellow human just identified 63 vulnerabilities in my published specifications. 63 weaknesses I didn't even know existed because I've never actually been in combat. I design weapons from a laboratory. He uses them in situations where mistakes mean death. We're not operating with the same knowledge base." So hire combat consultants. Get input from people who've actually used military equipment in real situations. I should have done that from the beginning. Vaughn finally looked at her. You tried to tell me, multiple times. I dismissed your concerns because I assumed your loyalty to humanity made you biased. I was the biased one. Before Tessa could respond, Pip burst back into the observation deck, his datapad clutched in his paws and his whiskers twitching with agitation. Director, I've completed my analysis of the combat demonstration. Let me guess, Vaughn said wearily. Multiple critical failures in our tactical algorithms. Actually, no. The Apex 7 units performed exactly as designed. Every decision they made was optimal according to their programming. Pip pulled up holographic displays showing the combat sequence. The problem is that Mr. Webb operated outside our optimization parameters entirely. He didn't try to beat our tactics. He invalidated the framework our tactics were based on. Vaughn leaned forward, his scientific interest apparently overriding his wounded pride. Explain. The Apex 7 units are programmed to identify optimal tactical solutions, cover positions that provide maximum protection with optimal firing angles. Approach vectors that minimize exposure while maximizing threat elimination probability. Movement patterns that conserve energy while maintaining combat effectiveness. Everything calculated to achieve perfect tactical execution. Yes, that's the entire design philosophy. Right. But Mr. Webb didn't care about optimal tactics. He cared about survival and victory in that order. When he took inferior cover positions, he wasn't making tactical mistakes. He was moving to locations our algorithms wouldn't predict because they were objectively worse, which made them strategically better. Pip pulled up a specific sequence showing Marcus charging directly at an Apex 7 unit while singing. This moment here, our threat assessment algorithms calculated a 2% probability of a direct frontal assault. The tactical database contained no instances of opponents vocalizing children's songs during combat. The synthetic hesitated for 0.3 seconds trying to process this unexpected behavior. In combat, 0.3 seconds is an eternity. So he exploited our reliance on probability algorithms, Vaughn said slowly. More than that, he understood that our synthetics would always choose the optimal tactical solution, which meant their behavior was predictable despite their superior capabilities. He created scenarios where the optimal solution led to defeat. The crossfire situation where two units shot each other. He positioned himself at the exact intersection of their optimal firing solutions, then moved at the last possible moment. Tessa watched the replay, seeing Marcus's strategy with new clarity. He'd been fighting the Apex 7 units' programming, not their physical capabilities. Every absurd action had been calculated to produce hesitation, confusion, or predictable responses he could exploit. It's actually brilliant, Pip continued, his academic excitement overcoming his nervousness. Tactically chaotic, but strategically sound. He turned our strengths into weaknesses. The better our synthetics performed according to their programming, the more predictable they became, which means any competent human military analyst could develop similar counter-tactics, Vaughn said quietly. Given enough exposure to our units, they'd learn the patterns, develop doctrine for exploiting our algorithms, distribute that knowledge across their forces. Exactly. The Apex 7 design is sound, but it's not a replacement for human soldiers. It's a different tool with different applications. Vaughn stood and walked to the observation window, looking down at the arena where his perfect warriors had been systematically dismantled. I owe several people apologies, starting with you, Ms. Rourke. Appreciated but not necessary. It's necessary. You told me combat experience mattered. I dismissed you. You warned me about underestimating human adaptability. I ignored you. You suggested we needed perspective from actual soldiers. I considered it sentimentality. Vaughn turned back to face her. I was wrong about the technology, about humans, about listening to expertise I didn't want to hear. Before the moment could get too sincere, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. Tessa immediately checked her security console, expecting some crisis related to Marcus's departure. Instead, she found something much worse. Director, we have incoming vessels, multiple signatures, They're broadcasting consortium military codes. Why would consortium military be here? Vaughan demanded. We haven't requested any inspections. Pip checked his own systems, his whiskers drooping. Director, I think they might be responding to the earlier security breaches. When Mr. Webb bypassed our systems, it triggered automatic reports to consortium oversight. They must have dispatched a response team. How long until they dock? 15 minutes. Vaughan's mandibles clicked rapidly. This is problematic. They'll want a full accounting of the security failures. They'll review today's events. They'll see the combat demonstration footage. Is that a problem? Tessa asked. Seems like useful data for improving the Apex 7 design. It's a problem, because consortium military leadership specifically approved our project based on my assurances of human obsolescence. If they see footage of a human defeating multiple units in direct combat, they'll question the entire program. Possibly terminate funding, definitely terminate my career. Tessa felt a complex mixture of emotions. Part of her wanted to point out that this was consequences for poor judgment and arrogant claims. Another part recognized that Vaughan had at least admitted his mistakes, which was more than many people managed. What if we emphasize the learning opportunities? Pip suggested nervously. The demonstration revealed vulnerabilities we can address. That's valuable information for improving the design. Or it reveals that the fundamental design philosophy is flawed, Vaughan countered. Which is actually true, based on today's evidence. An idea occurred to Tessa. Probably a bad idea, almost certainly something that would complicate her life, but potentially the right thing to do anyway. What if Marcus came back? Vaughan stared at her. What? What if Marcus Webb, former Human Special Operations, current independent consultant, happened to be here conducting a friendly evaluation of consortium weapons technology, with your full authorization and cooperation? That's not what happened. No, but it's a better story than he broke into our facility and embarrassed our research project. Turn it into an official consultation. He identified vulnerabilities, suggested improvements, provided valuable combat perspective. Makes you look proactive instead of incompetent. He'll never agree to that. He might. Tessa pulled out her comm. His shuttle hasn't left yet, worth asking. She sent a message to the contact information Marcus had provided, explaining the situation and the proposed arrangement. The response came back almost immediately. Sure, my consultation rate is 5,000 credits per hour, minimum 4-hour engagement, half up front. Also, I want lunch. The good cafeteria, not the staff one. Tessa showed the message to Vaughan, who looked like he was calculating whether paying an exorbitant consulting fee was better than explaining today's events to consortium military leadership. 20,000 credits, he said weakly. Plus lunch, Tessa added. Plus lunch, to pretend he was here officially instead of illegally. To acknowledge he was here officially as a consultant, providing combat evaluation services. Which, technically, he did. Just without prior arrangement or payment. Vaughan's mandibles clicked several times in rapid succession. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. A genuine laugh that suggested he'd found something absurdly funny in the whole situation. Fine, get him back here. Prepare consultation contracts, and someone find out what's actually good in our cafeteria, because I've never eaten there. Tessa sent the confirmation to Marcus. His response was a thumbs-up emoji followed by, Be there in 10. Have paperwork ready. And seriously, figure out the lunch situation. I'm starving. Pip had been watching this exchange with obvious confusion. So, we're hiring the human who broke into our facility to pretend he didn't break into our facility by claiming he was officially evaluating our facility? Essentially, yes, Tessa confirmed. Is that legal? It's definitely something. Legal might be a strong word. I hate all of this, Vaughan announced, but I hate unemployment more. Make it happen. The next 10 minutes were a flurry of activity. Tessa drafted consulting contracts with backdated authorization codes. Pip prepared presentation materials that framed the combat demonstration as planned evaluation rather than spontaneous challenge. Other staff members scrambled to create the appearance of an organized consultation rather than chaotic security breach. Marcus arrived with 3 minutes to spare before the consortium vessels docked. He'd somehow acquired a more professional-looking jacket and a datapad that appeared significantly more official than the one he'd been carrying earlier. "So I'm a consultant now," he said cheerfully. "Cool, always wanted to be management." "You're not management," Vaughan said through clenched mandibles. "You're an independent contractor providing combat evaluation services." "Right. That's definitely different somehow." Marcus scanned the hastily prepared contracts. "These look good, professional. Only 17 spelling errors. I accept your terms." "There aren't 17 spelling errors." "Sure there are, but I'm not being paid to proofread, so I'll let it slide." Marcus signed the contract with a flourish. "One additional clause, though. When the consortium military shows up, let me do most of the talking." "Why?" "Because you're still processing the emotional trauma of being wrong about something important, and that makes people say unfortunate things. I, on the other hand, have no emotional investment in this situation and can lie through my teeth without hesitation. That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be, but it is practical." The consortium military team arrived exactly on schedule, led by a stern-looking Vraxian commander named Krell, who looked like he'd been bred specifically to intimidate subordinates and disapprove of things. "Director Vaughan," Krell announced without preamble. "We're responding to automated security alerts from your facility. Multiple breaches detected. Unauthorized access to restricted areas. Explain." "Commander Krell," Vaughan began, his voice only slightly unsteady, "allow me to introduce Marcus Webb, independent military consultant. He's been conducting a comprehensive security evaluation of our facility as part of our ongoing quality assurance protocols." Krell's eyes narrowed. The security breaches were part of an authorized evaluation? "Exactly," Marcus said, stepping forward with a confidence that suggested he absolutely belonged in this conversation. "Standard penetration testing. You identify vulnerabilities by exploiting them under controlled conditions. Your automated systems correctly identified my unauthorized access, which demonstrates their functioning as designed. You're human. Guilty as charged. Director Vaughan recently made public statements regarding human military obsolescence. Yet you've hired a human consultant?" Marcus grinned. "Yeah, that's ironic, isn't it? But Director Vaughan is a scientist, and scientists update their conclusions when presented with new evidence. Turns out, human combat experience provides valuable perspective for weapons development." Who knew? Krell looked between Marcus and Vaughan, clearly trying to determine if this was legitimate or an elaborate cover story. Which, to be fair, it was both. "I'll need to review your security footage, verify that these breaches were authorized." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed immediately. "I'll walk you through my entire evaluation. Point out every vulnerability I identified, explain my methodology, and provide recommendations for improvements. Should take about 4 hours. That's what Director Vaughan is paying me for anyway." And that's how Marcus Webb, who'd broken into a secure facility and embarrassed a prestigious research project, ended up conducting an official 4-hour presentation for consortium military leadership on security vulnerabilities and combat evaluation methodologies. Tessa watched from the back of the conference room as Marcus transformed his earlier chaos into a structured, professional analysis. He highlighted the same security flaws he'd exploited, but framed them as important discoveries rather than embarrassing oversights. He showed footage of the combat demonstration, but presented it as valuable data for improving synthetic combat algorithms rather than evidence of their limitations. It was masterful, dishonest, certainly, but masterful. Commander Krell took extensive notes. By the end of the presentation, he looked less suspicious and more concerned about security protocols across other consortium facilities. "This is troubling information," Krell said. "If your facility has these vulnerabilities, other installations likely share similar weaknesses. Mr. Webb, would you be available to conduct similar evaluations at additional locations?" Marcus pretended to consider this. "My schedule is pretty full, but I suppose I could make time, for the right compensation." "The consortium pays standard contractor rates." "I don't work for standard rates, Commander. I work for rates that reflect the value of specialized expertise." They negotiated for another 15 minutes. Tessa watched Vaughan's expression cycle through various stages of disbelief as Marcus casually arranged to conduct security evaluations at 6 additional consortium facilities, at 5,000 credits per hour, plus expenses. When the meeting finally concluded, and Commander Krell departed with his team, promising to file a positive report about the facility's proactive security measures, everyone remaining in the conference room sat in stunned silence. "Did that really just happen?" Pip asked. "I think we just watched someone turn a catastrophic security breach into a lucrative consulting contract," Tessa said. Vorn looked at Marcus with an expression that might have been respect or horror, or possibly both. "You're either a genius or a sociopath." "Why not both?" Marcus checked his datapad. "Anyway, that was fun, but my shuttle's leaving in 30 minutes and I still haven't gotten lunch." "Someone want to show me to the good cafeteria?" The cafeteria, it turned out, was mediocre, regardless of which one you went to. Marcus didn't seem to mind, working his way through what appeared to be some kind of noodle dish, while Tessa, Vorn, and Pip sat across from him in a booth that had definitely seen better days. "So," Marcus said between bites, "want to know why humans will never actually be obsolete in combat? The real reason, not the diplomatic version I gave Commander Krell." Vorn's mandibles clicked. "I suspect you're going to tell us regardless of my answer." "You're learning. See, the thing about military technology is that everyone focuses on capability. Speed, strength, accuracy, all that measurable stuff. And that's important, don't get me wrong. But it's not why wars get won or lost. Then what is? Spite, Marcus grinned. Pure, stubborn, irrational spite. The absolute refusal to lose even when losing makes perfect logical sense. Pip's whiskers twitched. That's not a rational strategic advantage. Exactly, it shouldn't work. It violates every principle of logical tactical analysis. But it does work, because logic assumes everyone's trying to optimize outcomes. Humans don't optimize. We get mad, we get creative, we get so thoroughly annoyed that we'll do ridiculous things just to prove people wrong. Like breaking into a secure military facility because some retired Marines got their feelings hurt, Tessa suggested. Exactly like that. Marcus pointed his fork at her. Your average species in the galaxy fights until the cost-benefit analysis suggests retreat is optimal. Humans fight until we win, or until continuing is physically impossible. That's not a feature. That's a bug in our psychology that happens to be tactically useful. Vorn leaned back in his seat. So your argument is that human military advantage comes from collective emotional dysfunction. When you phrase it like that, it sounds bad. But yeah, basically. Marcus finished his noodles. Your Apex 7 synthetics are better than humans at everything you can measure. But they'll never have that moment where they're exhausted, low on ammunition, facing overwhelming odds. And someone says, you know what? Let's try one more stupid thing and maybe it'll work. That's a human specialty. The stupid thing that maybe works, Pip repeated, taking notes again. Is there tactical doctrine for this? Not really. It's more of a philosophical approach. Military academies try to teach it as adaptive tactical flexibility, but that's just a fancy way of saying make stuff up when the plan falls apart. Tessa found herself nodding. She'd experienced that exact phenomenon during her service years. The moment where everything went wrong and someone suggested something absurd that somehow worked because the enemy was unexpecting absurdity. There's something else, though, she said. Something you haven't mentioned. Marcus looked at her with interest. What's that? You came here to prove a point about human capability, but you could have just filed a complaint with consortium oversight. Could have challenged the claims through official channels. Instead, you broke into a secure facility and picked a fight with combat synthetics. Your question being? Why that approach instead of something safer and more official? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his earlier humor fading into something more serious. Because the galaxy needs to remember something important about humans. We're cooperative, we're friendly. We'll trade with you, work with you, build alliances and partnerships. But we're not soft, we're not weak. And we really don't like being dismissed. He pulled out his datapad and showed them a news feed. Vorn's announcement about human obsolescence had gone viral across multiple systems. The comments were a mixture of agreement and mockery. Lots of jokes about outdated biological models. Quite a bit of speculation about humans being relegated to museum exhibits. Every species that's thrived in the galaxy, has done it by being the best at something, Marcus continued. The Vraxians are administrators, the Quellans are innovators, the Andromedans are diplomats. Humans, we're survivors. We're adaptable. We're the species that looks at impossible situations and says, "Try me." And you wanted to remind everyone of that, Vaughan said quietly. Wanted to remind you specifically, because you're brilliant, Director. Your synthetics are impressive. But you made the mistake of thinking that being better at measurable tasks means being better at warfare. War isn't about who's faster or stronger. It's about who's still standing when everything's gone wrong. And humans are really, really good at still standing. Pip had stopped taking notes, listening with an intensity that suggested he was re-evaluating several fundamental assumptions. So human military advantage is cultural, rather than technological. Cultural, psychological, maybe a little bit genetic bad luck that made us stubborn instead of sensible. Marcus stood up, stretching. Point is, you can build better weapons. You can design superior soldiers. You can optimize everything. But you can't program the human response to being told we're obsolete, which is to show up and prove you wrong in the most inconvenient way possible. Vaughan stood as well, extending an appendage toward Marcus. Thank you for the demonstration, the security evaluation, and the extremely expensive lesson in humility. Hey, you paid for the last 4 hours? Consider the earlier stuff a free sample. They shook, and Marcus's grin returned. But seriously, take another look at your Apex 7 design. It's good technology, just market it correctly. Complements human forces instead of replacing them. The consortium will probably like that message better anyway. What will you tell your Marine friends? That their concerns were noted and addressed. That the galaxy still respects human capability. That anyone who thinks we're obsolete is welcome to test that theory, but they should probably update their insurance first. Marcus headed toward the exit, then paused and turned back. Oh, one more thing. You've got 17 additional security vulnerabilities I didn't mention in my official report. Figured I should save some material for the next consultation. There isn't going to be a next consultation, Vaughan said firmly. Sure there is. Commander Krell already scheduled me for facility evaluations across the sector. We'll probably run into each other. Marcus pulled out another business card. Keep this, in case you need human perspective on anything else. First consultation's expensive, but repeat clients get a discount. How much of a discount? 10%. That's not much of a discount. It's 10% off the rate that got me 20,000 credits for 4 hours of work. Be grateful. And with that final observation, Marcus Webb walked out of the cafeteria, presumably toward his shuttle and whatever other adventures awaited someone who made a career out of proving people wrong. Tessa, Vaughan, and Pip sat in silence for a moment. I hate that he's right, Vaughan finally said, about the design philosophy, the marketing strategy, the security vulnerabilities, all of it. He's all so expensive, Pip added. Worth it, though, Tessa said. We learned more from one day with Marcus than 6 months of controlled testing. That's because we were asking the wrong questions. Vaughan stood, his posture suggesting renewed purpose. We need to redesign our evaluation protocols. Include combat veterans in the assessment process. Test against unpredictable variables instead of optimized scenarios. And for the love of all that's scientific, never again publicly declare any military force obsolete without exhaustive real-world validation. Probably wise, Tessa agreed. They headed back toward the laboratory, already planning modifications to the Apex 7 program. As they walked, Tessa checked her personal messages and found one from Marcus. By the way, there are 3 listening devices in the cafeteria booth where we were sitting. Probably want to check those. Also, your facility's coffee is terrible. Work on that. Regards, Marcus. Tessa showed the message to Vaughan, who stopped walking and made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cry of despair. Listening devices, in our own cafeteria. Probably been there for months, Tessa said. We should sweep the entire facility. Add it to the list of improvements. Right below hire human consultants and above fix the coffee. They continued toward the laboratory, where the Apex 7 synthetics waited in their charging stations, perfect and optimized and ready for redesign. Because, as Marcus had demonstrated, perfection was overrated. Adaptability, creativity, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat were the real tactical advantages. And humans, for all their flaws and inefficiencies and tendency to do profoundly stupid things, had those qualities in abundance. Station Kepler-9 continued its orbit, its weapons laboratory continuing its research, but with a newfound respect for the species they'd dismissed that morning. Word of the day's events would spread eventually. Stories would be told. The details would get exaggerated, as military stories always did. But the core truth would remain. The Galactic Weapons Consortium declared humans obsolete. One human knocked on the door and politely disagreed. 3 months later, Marcus Webb's consulting business was booming. Turns out lots of facilities wanted their security evaluated by someone who'd proven he could break into a maximum security weapons laboratory without triggering alarms. The consortium kept him busy, though he maintained his exorbitant rates on principle. Vaughan's research continued with modified objectives. The Apex 7 program was rebranded as tactical support units designed to complement human forces rather than replace them. Sales projections looked promising. The consortium was pleased. Vaughan's career survived, though his ego remained permanently bruised. And somewhere on Earth, in a bar frequented by retired Marines, someone bought Marcus a drink and asked how he'd handled the whole obsolete human situation. Marcus smiled, took a sip and said, "I knocked on their door and explained they'd made a math error." "What kind of math error?" "They forgot to carry the human." The Marines laughed, because they understood. The galaxy might have better technology, superior genetics, and more advanced civilizations. But humanity had something that couldn't be programmed or optimized or purchased. The absolute refusal to be counted out. And that, more than any weapon or synthetic soldier or tactical advantage, was why humans would never be obsolete. Not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but because they were too stubborn to quit and too creative to lose. Even when logic said they should. Especially when logic said they should.